Thing, but actually, while praying about it earlier during the worship time, a story came to my mind out of the Bible. This is where Elijah meets that widow, and I believe this is like a prophetic story for some of you, or maybe somehow for all of us. And it is when Elijah, it says in the book of First Kings 17, I will be reading from 10 to 16. So Elijah arrives at the gates of the village, and he sees a widow gathering sticks, and he asked her, "Would you please bring me a little water in a cup?" As she was going to get it, he called to her, "Bring me a bite of bread too." But she said, "I swear by the Lord your God that I don't have a single piece of bread in the house, and I have only a handful of flour left in the jar and a little cooking oil in the bottom of the jug. I was just gathering a few sticks to cook this last meal, and then my son and I will die." But Elijah said to her, "Don't be afraid. Go ahead and do just what you've said, but make a little bread for me first. Then use what's left to prepare a meal for yourself and your son. For this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says: there will always be flour and olive oil left in your containers until the time when the Lord sends rain and the crops grow again." So she did as Elijah said, and she and Elijah and her family continued to eat for many days. There was always enough flour and olive oil left in the containers, just as the Lord had promised through Elijah. So I believe that there will be, actually I saw, like in an impression, I saw jars filled with oil. And I felt like this oil was not really poured in, but uh, it was just there. It just appeared. And I believe this is like a word for someone here, or for some of us, that um, that this oil will not run dry. This um, um, how you call it? Like in a machine, you have this grease when when things are working fine. And I believe this oil is symbolic for somehow the Holy Spirit also, and also the ability to be effective in the kingdom of the Lord. And even though we or some of us might feel we are running dry, we don't have any strength anymore, it will appear, it will be there supernaturally. The provision will be there. So with this introduction, I would like to start what I actually prepared. uh, and we would be reading the book of Nehemiah today, and Nehemiah chapter 1 and 2 mainly. And then next time I would like to continue about Nehemiah. And I came to that book because many times when we talk about Nehemiah, it's usually related to some building projects. When you want to encourage people to give for the building project, you usually, many times we preach about Nehemiah and how he built that. That's a wonderful illustration actually, but it has actually a lot of more things to say. And I personally, I didn't always study um, the parts of that book with another relation, because I used it also for 2 or 3 times for encouraging people to give some building projects. So basically, we can see in the Bible, every person in the Bible that was being used by God reflects the characteristics of God to a certain point. Like, for example, in the life of Joshua, we see how he was courageous, how he was a leader who had the supernatural courage to fight against everything. And also, in a certain point, we can see in the life of Nehemiah how the character of God is actually reflecting through his life. And when we see the name Nehemiah, it means Yahweh comforts. The meaning of that name means that the Lord comforts. And yeah, when we see the word comforter, um, or God who comforts, it's also being used as a name for the Holy Spirit. In John 14:16, when Jesus says, um, I will, my Father will send you another helper, that the helper will come. And this helper is actually a word parakletos, which also means that the Holy Spirit comforts. So somehow, when we see at the life of Nehemiah, we can also see how the character of the Holy Spirit um, is also reflecting through all his life, through what he's doing actually. And we can see in verse 4, chapter 1, verse 4 in Nehemiah, as soon as I heard those words, I sat down and wept and mourned for days, and I continued fasting and praying before the God of heaven. So the situation is this: for several years, the walls of the city of Israel, of Jerusalem, they are actually damaged. They are burned down. There's no protection for that city, and he just hears this news from people who have been just to that city, and they just came and they report to him, and um, um, he feels like he's struck by this news. He weeps. He sits down. He mourns for days, and I think this is also something we can see the love that the Holy Spirit has for for us. That when He sees things in our lives that need to be changed, or that are not protected, that are not functioning in that manner that they should, He actually mourns, and then uh, he becomes emotional. So many times, depending on what Christian background we might have, sometimes we are being like driven sometimes that it is always our responsibility to take care of things in our Christian life, that things go well and nice, that we should be doing everything in a perfect order. But when things doesn't go well, then God is upset with us and He's somehow scolding us. But I just want to encourage um, all of us that the Holy Spirit actually is more concerned about us, and He actually feels the pain. He actually becomes emotional. It's not that when we mess up certain things in our lives, that He is just there to scold us, but He's there actually who understands the situation and who wants to actually deal with these things. And then in verse 11, we see that Nehemiah, it's a job description of Nehemiah. He was the cupbearer of the king. And the cupbearer, he was someone who would taste the food first before the king tastes it. That means if someone wants to poison the king, the cupbearer would die first. And I believe this is also a wonderful illustration of the Holy Spirit, that if someone wants to harm us, he has to go through Holy Spirit first. He has to go through God first. So if there are people they are trying to harm us, the people or situations that are trying to harm us, um, the Holy Spirit is there, standing as a like a cupbearer and protecting us, because the Bible also says that we are kings and queens, and the Lord is the King of kings. So the cupbearer is the one who um, takes the arrows for us. And then another point I was amazed was in chapter 2. Um, so when Nehemiah hears this, he prays about it, he becomes sad. And in 2 verse 1 to 3, I'll be reading. In the month of Nisan, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, when wine was placed before him, I took the wine and gave it to the king. So he did his job. He just placed the wine to the king. He gave it to the king. And then, now I had not previously been sad in his presence. So the king said to me, why do you look sad when you are not sick? This is nothing but sadness of heart. And then Nehemiah says, then I was very frightened, and I said to the king, let the king live forever. Why should my face not be sad when the city, the place of my father's tombs, lies desolate, and its gates have been consumed by fire? So there was a common custom. Nobody could actually be sad in the presence of the king. So every employee actually around the king, his job was to keep the king happy, to not make him sad. And if you if you would disturb his mood, so it could mean that the king, yeah, would be upset with you, and he was, yeah, also sometimes killing those people. So everyone was actually having that job of keeping the king happy. But Nehemiah is very courageous in telling him that yes, he is sad, and he's sad because of this and this reason. So here we see another characteristic of the Holy Spirit, that he makes us courageous in front of situations that are actually dangerous, that are maybe going to be not so comfortable. But the Holy Spirit gives us supernaturally this courage to face it, and um, to put it into words that it will be understood, because then we know that the king actually understands that, and he lets Nehemiah build that wall later. And in 2 Timothy 1 verse 7 it says, for God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. And then we see in another last point I would like to reflect on. In verse 2, Nehemiah 2, chapter 2, 13. So he goes out to the village, and he goes to that village gate at the night, and he inspects these walls. He inspects if these things are right, and and then he says, so I went out at night by the valley gate toward the dragon's well and the refuse gate, and inspected the walls of Jerusalem, which were broken down, and its gates, which were consumed by fire. So here we also see something that that the Holy Spirit actually inspects things. Um, he is really aware of things that are going on in us, and this is really beautiful. Also, as we're going to see in the next time when I'm going to share deeper how Nehemiah actually led this whole city to build and protect this wall, and that things are not hidden, um, like the small things that we sometimes think that are not really meaningful, but they are meaningful to God actually, and He takes care. And a wonderful illustration I heard from another pastor was that this wall was built actually with stones that were already damaged. Most of the stones that they were using, they were already maybe black and then burnt down, but they used them again. And those stones were actually witnesses of what happened actually in the past. Because in the past, when the glory of the Lord was in that city, when the temple was there, those stones were somehow witnesses of all those glorious years, but they were also witnesses of what happened, of the destruction. And then they were placed again in that wall again. And when someone, for example, as a tourist comes to that city, he would see those black and burned down stones. It might be not so impressive from the outside. It might be not really like, oh wow, this is a beautiful wall. But for someone who lives in Israel, who lives in Jerusalem, and who sees those stones, for him it's actually history. He would be emotional. He would be crying, because he would know, okay, this is a symbol that God is actually still there. He has been there all the time. He has been there from the beginning of the glorious days, and he's now even there when we are going to have a restart again. So um, so when I think about this, the first Matthew 5:14 actually, where it says, "You are the light of the world, a city that is set on a hill cannot be hidden." It becomes like it receives like a deeper meaning to me, that that we are like a city on a hill, and that city is actually under the leadership of the Holy Spirit. That it can remain as a city on a hill, and even if its walls are maybe having this blackish stones, stones that are burnt down. Doesn't matter what we went through, doesn't matter what our past is, or maybe even we started nicely with God, and then we had our struggles, and then but but the Lord is able to place every stone in the right order, so it will shine like a city on a hill again. So these are my thoughts on the on Nehemiah's life. I know. Does anyone have something to add to that?